She was only 6 years old, barefoot in the snow, holding her newborn baby brother, trembling by the gates of a military outpost, lips blue, eyes wide, not a single tear. Just one whisper, "Please, don't let him die." No one knew where she came from, but one old K9 did, and when Ranger barked into the night, Sergeant Owen followed, into a mystery soaked in silence, betrayal, and a love stronger than blood. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. And if you believe that loyalty can save lives, hit that subscribe button, because this one will break you and then heal you. The wind over Fairbanks, Alaska, had a bite to it that night, the kind that slid through winter coats and scraped the bones beneath. Snow had fallen heavy since sundown, muffling the sounds of the Bravo 17 outpost, an old U.S. Army base turned security checkpoint after its decommissioning. The lights along the perimeter buzzed dully, halos of yellow fighting the storm, and inside the operations cabin, Sergeant Owen Matthews sat alone, back slightly hunched over the daily logbook. Owen was 42, broad-shouldered and square-jawed, with weathered hands and a scar that ran faintly from temple to jawline, a gift from a roadside blast outside Mosul a decade ago. His short, ash-brown hair was going silver at the temples, and his fatigues hung loose over a frame hardened more by memory than muscle. Years of combat had receded into paperwork and night duty now, and he was fine with that, or at least that's what he told himself. In the corner of the room, sprawled near the heater, lay Ranger, a 7-year-old German shepherd with a thick black and tan coat, graying slightly at the snout. His right ear stood tall, while the left bore a subtle notch from a training incident years back. Once a top-tier K9, Ranger had served 3 tours overseas, trained in explosives detection and tracking, before being retired after a near-fatal shrapnel wound in his hind leg. Since then, he'd stayed with Owen, not just as a partner, but as a silent guardian of the man's quieter days. Tonight, Ranger had been unusually restless. He'd paced the room twice, sniffed near the door, then returned to the heater with a low whine. Owen looked up from his logbook, just as Ranger stiffened, ears erect, nose twitching. Then, with a sharp bark that echoed off the metal walls, the dog bolted toward the door. Owen cursed under his breath, shoved the chair back, and grabbed his parka and flashlight. "Ranger!" he called, but the shepherd had already pushed through the flap and into the blizzard. By the time Owen reached the outer gate, the snow was thigh-deep, and visibility barely stretched 10 feet. Ranger stood at full alert, facing the fence, body rigid. There was something ahead. Movement? A shape? Owen approached slowly, weapon slung, flashlight beam cutting through the flakes. Then he heard it. A sound barely louder than the wind. 3 soft knocks, tap, 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 on the metal gate. He halted, heart rate rising. "Who's there?" No answer. Just the wind. He signaled to Ranger, who advanced with a low growl, sniffing the base of the gate. Owen moved closer, switched to the infrared lens on his scope, and saw it. A small figure, almost invisible in the snow, crouched just beyond the gate. He drew back the hatch. Standing there, barely more than a shadow, was a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6. Her clothes were torn, soaked through, and stiff with ice. Her cheeks were red from the cold, but her eyes, big, glassy, and hollow, were dry. In her arms, wrapped in what looked like a hospital blanket, was a baby, maybe just a few weeks old, unmoving. The girl looked straight into Owen's eyes. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. She whispered, "He's hot, burning. Mama said run. I didn't look back." Owen's training kicked in. He waved Ranger to heel, then knelt slowly to the girl's level. "My name is Owen," he said gently. "You're safe now." "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Emily." "And him?" "Noah," she said, and lowered her head. "My brother." Ranger stepped closer, gently nudging the baby's blanket with his nose, then looked up at Owen and gave a single urgent bark. That was all the confirmation he needed. Owen lifted Emily, cradling her freezing frame against his chest. Then, with practiced ease, he scooped Noah into his other arm, shielding the baby from the wind. Ranger ran ahead, barking twice, one short, one long, the signal for medical emergency. Back inside the infirmary, the on-duty doctor, Rachel Green, was already prepping supplies. Rachel was in her late 30s, tall and lean, with close-cut black curls and calm brown eyes. She had a reputation for saying little and doing everything. Years in humanitarian war zones had stripped her of unnecessary emotion, but filled her with purpose. She took one look at the baby and issued orders like a field general. Temp 39.8, skin dehydrated, breathing shallow. We need fluids fast. She turned to Owen. Get a cot and thermal blankets, and find out where she came from. Owen nodded and carried Emily to a nearby bench. She was quiet, eyes scanning the walls, the sterile equipment, Ranger's tail as it thudded gently against the floor. When Owen knelt beside her again, she looked up. Are we in trouble? She asked. He shook his head. Not anymore. She pressed her forehead to his chest for a second, then leaned back. I didn't know where to go, she murmured. But your dog? He looked at me, like he knew. Owen glanced at Ranger, who sat nearby, watching the baby with intense, unmoving focus. He did, Owen said. He always knows. The infirmary was dim, lit only by the low yellow hum of overhead bulbs and the pulsing monitor tracking Noah's fading vitals. The baby lay wrapped in clean blankets, his skin still flushed and hot, his tiny chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Dr. Rachel Green moved like a quiet storm, precise, quick, silent. Her long, dark fingers adjusted tubes and sensors while her eyes scanned data. She wore her short-sleeved scrubs layered under a thermal vest, dark blue against her russet-toned skin. Tall and lean, she moved like someone who had carried too much and let none of it show, hardened not by cruelty, but by years of watching people die when systems failed. Owen stood beside her, arms folded tight, watching the baby in the bassinet. His jaw was tense, teeth clenched behind closed lips. He hadn't said a word in minutes. Rachel glanced up. He'll stabilize with fluids if the fever breaks in the next few hours, she said. But it was close. Another 30 minutes, he might not have made it. Owen only nodded, gaze unmoving. Across the room, Emily sat on a cot, knees drawn to her chest, still wearing the same torn sweater and thin pants she had arrived in. A fresh blanket had been wrapped around her shoulders, but she hadn't moved much. Her face was pale, speckled with freckles, lips slightly cracked, and her light brown hair was tangled and damp from melting snow. She stared at nothing. Ranger sat at her feet, his body curled protectively against her legs, his nose twitching every few seconds as he sniffed the air. The old K9 had been restless since they returned. His ears flicked back and forth, and every few minutes he'd lift his head to glance toward the hallway, toward the door leading deeper into the base. Something about the infirmary set him on edge. Owen knelt beside Emily. You warm enough? She nodded without looking at him. He tried again. You were really brave, you know. Coming out into that cold with your brother. You saved his life. Her voice came quiet, nearly inaudible. I didn't know where else to go. You picked the right place. She finally looked at him, and for a moment Owen felt the sting of recognition. Those eyes. He had seen them before. Not Emily's. Another little girl, years ago, with dark curls and a laugh that filled the kitchen. Anna. Owen stood abruptly, turned away, his hand clenched into a fist. Rachel had noticed too. Her voice cut gently through the air. Emily, she said, do you remember what happened before you came here? Emily hesitated, then nodded slowly. Can you tell us? She didn't speak right away. Instead, she reached into the blanket around her shoulders, tugged at something near her collarbone. It was a cheap pink necklace, the kind given out at dollar stores. But instead of a locket, dangling from the end was a small USB drive, scuffed, slightly bent, but still intact. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Owen stepped forward, careful not to alarm her. Where did you get that? He asked. Emily's fingers gripped it tighter. My mom put it there. She said if they came, and Dad didn't give them what they wanted, I should run and never lose this. Who were they? Emily's eyes flicked down. Men. 4 of them. One spoke American like you. The others were different. They yelled a lot, broke everything. Dad tried to stall them. I saw him push something under the floorboard. I think it was another USB. But then, they hit him. She stopped, swallowed. Ranger nuzzled closer against her shin. One man had a scar, she whispered. Here. She touched the side of her wrist. And a black watch. His gun had words on it. I couldn't read all of it, just F-R-E-E? Owen's stomach dropped. Freedom? She nodded. Rachel exchanged a look with him, then carefully stepped over to her desk and took the USB. I'll check this. No promises it's readable. It might be encrypted. Owen sat back down beside Emily. You said your mom told you to run? Emily blinked. She pushed me out the back, said to hold Noah and not look back. But I heard yelling, then gunshots, then nothing. The room went silent. The only sounds were Noah's soft breathing, Ranger's shifting paws, and the faint hum of the heater. Outside, the wind howled, as if trying to scratch its way through the metal walls. A knock broke the moment. Ben Taylor, the base's night communications tech, stuck his head in. Ben was in his mid-20s, with sandy blonde hair tucked messily under a beanie, wire-rimmed glasses, and an awkward gait that came from a childhood injury he never talked about. Despite that, he was sharp, loyal, and never far from a computer. Sarge, he said, voice low, you might want to see something. Owen glanced to Rachel, who gave a small nod, then followed Ben down the corridor. Ranger stayed beside Emily. In the server room, Ben pulled up the gate's security footage. I was reviewing the logs like you asked. Check this out. He played the tape from just an hour earlier. It showed Ranger sprinting across the snow, Owen following. But at the edge of the frame, right before the girl came into view, there was a shadow. Just out of focus, moving between two snowbanks, heading in the opposite direction. Ben froze the frame. Someone else was watching, might have followed her before she got here. Owen stared. You get a face? Too blurry, but that coat, same type worn by local contractors, could be nothing. Owen didn't reply. He stared at the grainy still image, then slowly whispered, or it could be the one with the black watch. Snow hadn't stopped falling since dawn. Outside the Bravo 17 outpost, white veils blanketed the pathways, burying tire tracks and footprints alike. The world beyond the fence was quiet, too quiet, as if the land itself had taken a breath and refused to exhale. Inside the command module, warmth hummed low, but tension settled like frost on glass, barely visible but always there. Sergeant Owen Matthews stood in front of a tall metal cabinet, labeled Pharmaceutical Storage Level C. The lock clicked open, and the smell of sterile packaging and synthetic polymers hit his nose. The labels on the boxes read, familiar, Midazolam 2 mg/5 ml, standard issue anti-seizure medication. But something didn't sit right. Ranger had led him here. The German Shepherd sat beside the door, body taut, nose twitching as he looked up at Owen, then back to the shelf near the bottom, then back again, making a quiet, pointed sound in his throat. He didn't bark. Ranger had been trained out of unnecessary alerts long ago, but his body language spoke volumes. Something here wasn't right. Owen crouched, pulled a box from the back row, and opened it. The vials were intact, labels clean, but the liquid inside had a slight yellowish tint. Wrong. The real stuff was colorless. He opened another box. Same. A third. Same. His brows tightened. He opened one vial and sniffed. Alcohol. Not the usual kind used in proper suspensions. Something cheap. Something counterfeit. Footsteps approached. Owen looked up as Dr. Rachel Green entered, still in her dark scrubs under a padded jacket. Her eyes, perpetually alert, narrowed as she scanned the open boxes. Those are the ones I used on the Patel child 2 nights ago, she said flatly. It didn't work. I blamed the dose. It wasn't the dose, Owen replied. It's not real. She stepped closer, took one vial, swirled it, opened the seal, and inhaled carefully. Her lips pressed into a tight line. Diluted. Artificial preservative base. No active sedative. Could have killed Noah, Owen said. Rachel nodded, her jaw flexing once. She rarely showed anger, but the crack behind her composure was visible now. I want every vial cataloged and retested. They were interrupted by a knock. Ben Taylor, the tech specialist, stood in the doorway, holding a tablet. His hoodie was too thin for the weather, and his cheeks were flushed with cold. I dug deeper, he said, stepping in. You were right. Someone's been wiping logs. Look here. He tapped the screen. Inventory for midazolam shows 30 vials entered 3 weeks ago under supply manifest code M047, but there's no record of them ever being tested. In fact, the test entry was overwritten. Owen squinted. Who has authority to override a med check? Only 3 names on this base: Rachel, me, and Staff Sergeant Derek Mason. Rachel turned slowly, her voice low. Mason's not even supposed to be managing logistics anymore. Ben shrugged. I thought he was reassigned. He's temporary acting logistics head while Captain Keller's on leave, Owen muttered. That explains how this slipped in. Ben nodded. And there's more. I checked satellite relay logs. About a week ago, there was a spike in outgoing data packets, non-medical, tagged under Mason's old field ID, encrypted, untraceable. But the size matches a data transfer, possibly shipping manifests. Owen exhaled through his nose. They're covering something bigger. Suddenly Ranger barked, a sharp, low sound, and walked swiftly to the far corner of the storage room. He sat down facing a wall panel, nose tilted up, sniffing rapidly. What is it, boy? Owen asked, walking over. He tapped the panel lightly. It sounded hollow. He glanced at Ben. You got a toolkit? Ben nodded and left quickly. Rachel folded her arms. That compartment's not on the original blueprints. I don't think it's supposed to be, Owen replied. Within minutes, Ben returned with a crowbar and a small flashlight. Owen pried the panel loose, revealing a shallow compartment tucked behind metal bracing. Inside were 2 sealed crates, military gray, stenciled with faded text. Med Supply Priority A. Dust coated them, but the latch was recently polished. He opened one. Inside, tightly packed, were vials of genuine midazolam. Clear, unadulterated. The real thing. Rachel inhaled sharply. This is government grade. These haven't been issued here in over a month. Ben was already scanning the barcode. It's not on the base's active supply list, but it's marked for airlift dispatch, outbound, scheduled tomorrow. Which means, Owen said slowly, someone swapped the real supply, kept it hidden, and replaced it with fakes, then tried to send the good stuff somewhere else. To sell it, Rachel added, or deliver it to someone off record. Ranger sat silently now, as if satisfied. His tail thudded once against the floor. Ben wiped his palms on his pants. What do we do? Owen looked from Rachel to Ranger, then back to Ben. We gather every piece of data, logs, photos, chain of custody, and we get that to someone outside this base, quietly. Rachel nodded. I'll draft a full report. You'll need my sign-off to move medical files off network. Ben looked unsure. That'll flag internal alerts. Owen said, then we don't use the system. We use direct relay, external link. Ben hesitated. You're talking black channel. That's risky. It's the only way. Just then a voice came over the comms, crackling, distant, but clear. Command to Sergeant Matthews. Staff Sergeant Mason requests to see you in his office. Urgent. Owen exchanged a glance with Rachel. I'll go, he said. See what he wants. He turned to Ranger, who had not moved from his spot. Stay with her. Ranger followed him to the hallway anyway, then sat at the junction, eyes fixed on the path ahead, body tense. Owen didn't have to say it, but he did anyway. If anything happens, you know what to do. Ranger blinked once, no bark, no movement, but his posture said it all. The wind returned just past midnight, howling like something ancient and angry across the snow-blanketed expanse of Bravo 17. The base lay still under its floodlights, glowing like a forgotten outpost on the edge of the world. Inside the infirmary, the silence was too perfect. Rachel Green had been catching her breath in the break room, sipping weak black coffee and reviewing lab reports. Her shift had blurred into its 10th hour. Noah slept peacefully in the ward, finally stabilized. Emily had been tucked into the cot beside him earlier that evening, her small body curled around a worn pillow, Ranger lying protectively nearby. But now the cot was empty. Rachel blinked, her pulse quickening. She moved swiftly, checked the bathroom. Empty. The supply room, nothing. She rushed back to the hallway and tapped the wall comms, voice clipped. Sergeant Matthews, this is Green. Emily's gone. Repeat. Emily is not in the infirmary. A beat of static. Then Owen's voice crackled through sharp. What do you mean, gone? I just checked on her 5 minutes ago. On my way. Rachel turned to Ben Taylor, who had fallen asleep in the server station chair, his glasses crooked and laptop still open. Wake up. Now. Ben blinked hard, sat upright. What? She's missing. Start pulling hallway feeds, anything from the past hour. Just as Ben started typing, Rachel spotted something on the floor near the corner where Emily had slept. A small smear of red, fresh blood, no larger than a thumbprint. She knelt. It wasn't from Noah. Rachel's expression hardened. Ben, meanwhile, froze in front of the screen. Doc, you're going to want to see this." Owen had arrived by now, boots still carrying flecks of melting snow, face pale with rising dread. Rachel pointed silently to the blood. Ben rewound the hallway feed and played it on the main monitor. The timestamp read 0:27. The footage showed the main corridor outside the infirmary. At 0:29, the feed flickered slightly. Then a man appeared in frame. His movements were fast, confident. Tall, average build, black parka, face obscured by a tactical scarf and beanie. His gloves were military grade. He paused outside the infirmary door, cracked it open slightly. Seconds later, he emerged with Emily slung over his shoulder, her head limp, arms hanging down. She kicked once, barely. Rachel clenched her jaw. "She didn't go willingly?" Ben pointed to the top right corner. "Look, his ID badge isn't standard. It's a dummy tag. I can't track it." Owen's phone buzzed. One new message, no sender, no number. "I have the girl, alone, no games." Attached, a blurred image of Emily's face in the snow, her eyes barely open. Owen tightened his grip on the phone until the plastic creaked. "Get this to base command and patch me through to Ranger." He ran down the hallway, where the old German shepherd was already standing, ears up, tail stiff, nose twitching. Owen held out Emily's blanket. "Find her!" Ranger sniffed once, then again. Then he barked, a deep, deliberate call, and lunged toward the main gate. The guard on duty, Private Darnell, a wiry young man with acne scars and jumpy hands, barely had time to open the gate before Ranger burst through, Owen close behind in his heavy jacket and gear. The snow came down harder now, thick like cotton. Ranger paused at a crossroad of footprints, sniffed deeply, then turned east, toward the disused military warehouse at the edge of base grounds. As they neared the compound, Owen recognized the place. It was a derelict structure from the Cold War era, officially condemned. No cameras, no heat, no use. Perfect for hiding something, or someone. Ranger slowed, sniffing near the doorway. The footprints were deeper here, fresher. One set large, one small. The little one stopped at the door. Owen signaled silently. Ranger crouched low and moved in. Inside, the air was bitter. Metal shelves lined the walls, and long-forgotten crates collected dust under dim emergency lights. A single bulb flickered above. In the center of the room, Emily sat on a chair, her hands bound in front of her, a strip of cloth around her mouth. She wasn't crying. Her eyes were wide, locked on something beyond Owen's field of vision. "Emily," he whispered. She jolted slightly as if waking. Then her eyes darted left. Ranger didn't wait. He lunged leftward just as a figure emerged from behind a crate. The man wore the same black parka from the footage. He raised a pistol, silencer attached. But Ranger was faster. The dog slammed into the man's chest, jaws clamping on the man's gun arm. The shot fired, a soft, muted thud, but missed. Owen closed the distance, tackling the man to the ground. They struggled in the snow-dusted room, fists and knees and elbows. The man fought hard, trained, but not well enough. Owen landed a punch square on his jaw, then another to the ribs. The man fell, groaning, the gun skidding across the floor. Emily whimpered. Ranger stood guard, his body between her and the downed man, teeth bared. Owen knelt beside her, cutting the zip tie from her wrists. "You okay?" She nodded weakly. "He said if I screamed, he'd hurt Noah." Owen's face hardened. "You're safe now." Outside, headlights approached, the backup Rachel had sent. MP vehicles screeched to a halt. Within moments, the kidnapper was cuffed and taken away. Back at the base, Rachel hugged Emily tightly. No more wandering off. Ben appeared, holding up a flash drive. "That guy? I checked his comms. He sent the message from inside our base. He's not working alone." Owen looked down at Ranger, who was finally relaxing, tongue out, ears still alert. "We're not done," he said. "This goes deeper." But for now, Emily was safe. And Ranger, once again, had followed the truth through snow and silence. The cold inside the warehouse had changed. It no longer simply gnawed at the skin. It clawed deeper. as if the walls themselves had absorbed the cruelty that just unfolded. The mercenary lay crumpled near the rusted shelving, blood on his lip, wrists zip-tied behind his back. His name, as they later confirmed, was Tyler Dargan, ex-private security, discharged dishonorably for conduct unbecoming. Mid-30s, square jaw with a scar down the right cheek, lean but built like a coil spring. He had the kind of presence that made people instinctively uncomfortable. And now, Ranger had left a tear in his coat sleeve, and in his arm. Ranger, the 10-year-old German shepherd with silver in his muzzle and war in his blood, still stood between the danger and the girl, his teeth bared, tail stiff, breath steaming in the freezing air. He hadn't made a sound after the takedown, just a rumbling, protective growl, low and steady. Sergeant Owen Matthews, still breathing hard from the brief fight, knelt beside Emily. She sat huddled, wrists red from the bindings, her pink coat smudged with dirt and blood. Her curls had come loose from their clip, framing her pale face like frostbitten vines. "Emily," Owen said gently, "it's over now. You're safe." She looked at him, truly looked, and nodded. "He said I wasn't supposed to talk, but I think I have to." Owen exchanged a glance with Ranger, who gave a small huff and finally relaxed. The storm outside still screamed, but inside this warehouse, a strange calm settled. Owen activated his body cam manually and set it on the crate beside them. "Okay, tell me what you know." Emily's hands clenched. "That man was looking for something. He said he knew it was here, that my mom must have hidden it." "Did he say what?" She hesitated. "Something about a file, a USB. He said my dad made it." Owen's eyes narrowed. "Your dad? Do you remember his name?" Jeremy Rowe. He was an engineer. He worked with computers. Sometimes he showed me code, like puzzles with numbers. He said he helped make systems that tracked medicine." Ranger whined and nudged Emily's side softly, as if telling her she was doing great. Emily placed a hand in her coat pocket and then paused. Her small fingers brushed against something cold, hard. She slowly pulled out a small object. A metallic USB stick, scratched but intact. Taped crudely along its edge were 3 faded letters, Med. "My mom put this in here," Emily whispered. "She told me, if something happens, keep this close. Someone will hear you." I thought she meant angels. Owen's breath hitched. She meant us. He reached for the USB with gloved hands, then stopped. "Can I?" Emily nodded and placed it in his palm. The weight felt heavier than it should, as if it carried everything. The truth, the danger, the betrayal. Behind them, Private Darnell arrived with backup. The young soldier's breath fogged in the cold as he scanned the scene. "Sir, what happened here?" "He tried to silence her," Owen said, motioning toward Tyler. "But he didn't count on a dog with better instincts than his entire squad." Darnell radioed for a stretcher and backup transport. Meanwhile, Ben Taylor rushed in, clutching a thermal laptop. His wool cap was half fallen, cheeks flushed from running. "Got your call? The files we found earlier, they were encrypted, but this name, Jeremy Rowe, it was in the metadata. And this," he held up a printed sheet, "is part of a shipping manifest, altered. I think someone's been rerouting meds." Owen nodded. "We've got the drive. Let's get it to base." As medics moved in and Tyler Dargan was dragged to the Humvee, Ranger stood still, staring at the man. Just before they loaded him, Tyler sneered at the dog. "She's just a pawn. The real prize is in the data." Owen stepped closer. "Then you've already lost." The wind outside howled again. Snow swept across the warehouse floor like ghostly fingers. Back in the warmth of the infirmary, Owen removed his coat and watched as Rachel checked Emily once more. Her expression, normally brisk and professional, had softened. "She's okay. Dehydrated, a bit bruised, but okay." Rachel Green, late 30s, tall and lean with steel gray eyes and a quiet presence, had served as base medic for over a decade. Rumors said she'd once been a trauma doctor in Chicago, but a personal loss, never spoken aloud, had drawn her away from cities and into the stillness of places like Bravo 17. She rarely smiled, but tonight she placed a comforting hand on Emily's head. "Brave girl," she said quietly. Emily looked at Owen. "Did I do good?" "You did perfect," he replied. Then quietly, Your mom was right. Someone heard you. Ranger let out a deep breath and curled beside Emily's cot, tail sweeping gently. His duty wasn't over, but for now, the child he protected was safe. Owen knelt beside him and gave his neck a firm rub. "You old lion," he murmured. "You always know before I do." Ranger's ears flicked once, but his eyes, those deep, dark eyes, never left the door. Something still lingered outside, but inside, for now, there was warmth. Outside, the snow had eased into a quiet fall, but inside Bravo 17, a storm had begun. Sergeant Owen Matthews stood in the control hub, flanked by Ben Taylor and Dr. Rachel Green, the USB Emily had given him now inserted into an offline terminal. On the screen, line after line of encrypted data scrolled, file headers marked with shipment codes, financial logs, and internal correspondence. Names, signatures, locations, all threading back to Mason. Ben's fingers flew across the keys. Sweat dotted his brow despite the cold. The file's huge, layered with redundancy. Whoever built this was paranoid, but smart. Owen watched the security feed on the adjacent monitor. Soldiers moving. One by one, Mason's loyalists pulled from regular patrols and reassigned without explanation. They were closing in. Ranger lay under the console, his right flank rising slower than usual. The gash he'd taken from Tyler Dargan's knife wasn't deep, but it bled stubbornly. His breathing was steady, but heavy. Owen had cleaned the wound, but it needed more care than time would allow. "I'm pushing the final packet to the relay," Ben said, his voice strained. "But we need to boost signal strength. Without uplink confirmation, it'll bounce and corrupt." Rachel stepped forward, her posture tight but calm. "The main relay tower's locked under level 3 clearance. Mason locked us out." "Then we go black," Owen said. Ben glanced up. "That's breach of code. It's that or this dies here." Ben hesitated, then nodded once. "We'll use the legacy uplink. It still connects through the bunker system." Rachel's eyes widened. "The bunker's been sealed for years." "No cameras, no checkpoints," Owen replied. "They won't see us coming." Rachel moved to Noah's bassinet. The infant slept deeply, cheeks flushed from the fever, but not dangerously. She adjusted the IV line, her own concoction made from saline, sugar, and a crushed pill cocktail she'd mixed from emergency reserves. She looked at Owen. "If we leave, I take him with me." "You won't go alone," he said. Access to the lower bunker was hidden behind the old armory, what most of the current staff thought was a locked storage room for defunct gear. But Owen had been stationed here for almost 15 years. He knew which lockers weren't really lockers, and which doors responded to a 6-digit code only entered by analog key. The door groaned as it opened. Dust spilled from the stairwell, air dry, metallic, filled with the smell of copper and mildew. Ranger stepped forward first, limping slightly but determined. They moved quickly. Owen, Rachel with Noah, swaddled in her arms, and Ben with a shoulder bag of drives and a foldable uplink dish. Down below, the medical bunker opened like a forgotten time capsule. The walls were lined with abandoned gurneys and rusted oxygen tanks, but the generator still functioned. The uplink console blinked faintly, waiting. Ben went to work. "We're routing outside direct. Signal goes through 3 relays before it hits the Pentagon. Once it's out, there's no pulling it back." Owen nodded. "Do it." As Ben initiated the transmission, Rachel checked Ranger's wound under the flickering lights. She cleaned it again, this time with proper antiseptic. The dog didn't flinch. "You've done this before, haven't you?" she said to him softly. Ranger blinked, his breath slow, steady. Upstairs, alarms sounded. Rachel turned. "They found the control room." Ben didn't stop typing. "I need 2 minutes." Heavy boots thundered above. "We have to seal the hatch," Owen said. "Once it's closed, it's manual override only," Rachel warned. "No getting out unless someone opens from above." Owen looked at Ranger, then to Rachel. "We'll get out another way. Just send the file." Ben hit enter. The console flared green. "Packet 1, sent. Packet 2, uploading." Suddenly the lights flickered. The console sputtered. Ben swore. "Signal's being jammed. Mason's redirecting external antenna." Rachel picked up her sat phone and called a number. "Backup channel, satellite route 9. You can bounce it through the emergency rescue frequency." Ben plugged in a spare card. "We're not authorized." "We're past that," she said. Seconds later the signal resumed. Packet 2, sent, final segment encrypting. A muffled boom shook the ceiling. Plaster fell from above. They're breaching, Owen muttered. He drew his sidearm, stepping to the bunker entrance. Ben's fingers trembled on the keys. Just 10 seconds. Another explosion. A crack in the ceiling revealed boots above. Dust rained. Then, beep. Transmission complete. Ben slumped back. It's gone. They can't stop it now. Just as the lights died and power failed completely. When they climbed out an hour later through the old waste vent, the base was in lockdown. Mason's forces were sweeping the halls, but the air had shifted. Rumors were spreading. The data had leaked. Orders were coming from above. Ranger padded beside them, slower now, but still alert. His eyes never left Emily, who waited with a flashlight at the rear of the infirmary, crouched behind the medical storage shelves. Rachel clutched Noah close to her chest, and Ben carried a portable drive with a full copy of everything. Owen looked at them all. His team, not soldiers by rank, but by choice. And somewhere far from Bravo 17, the truth had begun to whisper. The sun never quite rose that morning. In Fairbanks, Alaska, dawn was more suggestion than arrival, a dull silver light diffused by snow clouds and the whispering wind. The snowfall had stopped hours ago, but the air remained still and cold, like a held breath. Bravo 17 lay in partial lockdown, military police scattered in disarray after the satellite breach, but none of that mattered to Sergeant Owen Matthews. Not now, because Mason was gone. 2 hours earlier, Staff Sergeant Derek Mason had slipped out of the command wing disguised in a convoy technician uniform. Clean shave, cap pulled low, Idaho badge forged. By the time his name hit the top of the alert system, his trail was already iced over. But not to everyone. Owen now stood outside the garage bay, boots planted in the fresh powder, eyes narrowed beneath a wool cap, jaw locked. His breath curled white in the air as he turned to his team. Private Amy Walsh, 27, stood at his left, short, strong, with copper skin and a scar across her eyebrow from a riot control incident years ago. She was quiet, but her eyes didn't blink much. She wore her hair in a tight bun and moved with the kind of efficiency that never asked for approval. On his right stood Corporal Devin Rios, 30, former recon-turned-mechanic. Tall, with a crooked smile and a perpetual grease stain on his collar, he wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but he had two things most soldiers didn't: improvisation and loyalty. And in front of them, tail stiff, one ear cocked forward, stood Ranger. The old K9 was limping, but ready. His bandaged side barely slowed his stride. His fur was dusted with frost, and his eyes, those deep, silent sentinels, locked on the trail ahead. "Truck's 2 minutes out," Rios said, checking the GPS. "He's heading south, back road, through the snow maintenance lane. No cameras past the ridge." "Then we cut him off," Owen said, loading his sidearm. "We go now." The Humvee tore across the ridgeline, tires fighting the icy terrain. Rios at the wheel, Walsh checking the rear gear. Ranger sat in the front, eyes tracking every bend in the road. Owen had taken off his gloves, fingers gripping the dashboard. The world outside blurred in white, trees skeletal in the distance. Mason's truck appeared just over the next hill, old military surplus, rebranded and painted, but unmistakable in profile. He was alone. "Block him in," Owen barked. Rios pulled the wheel. The Humvee slid sideways, cutting off the narrow pass. Mason slammed the brakes. His truck skidded, fish-tailed, and stopped just short of collision. The engine cut. A door opened. Mason stepped out slowly. Late 40s, tall, lean, with salt and pepper hair, and a face built on angles. In the distance, he always looked dignified. But up close, you could see the cracks, the twitch in his jaw, the sweat despite the cold. His hands lifted, but in his right glove, a bulge. Owen stepped forward. "It's over." Mason smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You should have stayed quiet." That's when Owen saw it, a flicker of movement behind Mason's truck, a small figure stumbling out of the back. Emily, her pink coat, her curls, her breath in the cold. "She followed him," Walsh whispered. "Oh God, she must have hidden in the truck." Mason turned. Everything happened in seconds. He reached into his jacket, pulled the gun. Emily froze. Owen shouted. Ranger moved. He bolted from the Humvee like a storm, paws pounding the snow. Mason raised the pistol, and the crack of a shot split the mountain air. The bullet never reached Emily. Ranger caught it first. He leapt, body twisting midair, intercepting the line of fire. The round buried into his ribs with a sickening sound. He hit the snow hard, tumbling once, then lay still. Owen screamed. He didn't remember running, didn't remember how his hand reached Mason's wrist, how he knocked the gun free, how his elbow drove into the man's collarbone, his fist into his jaw. Mason fell. Rios moved to cuff him, pressing his knee into the traitor's back. But Owen didn't stop at Mason. He ran to Ranger. The dog lay on his side, chest rising in sharp, shallow breaths, snow turning red beneath him. His eyes found Owen, tired but still focused, still aware. "Hold on," Owen whispered, crouching, his voice cracked. "Just hold on." Emily had dropped to her knees beside him, arms around Ranger's neck, her head pressed into his fur. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I got out. I'm sorry you had to—" Rachel appeared seconds later. She had followed the convoy, not trusting that Emily would stay behind. Her coat flared in the wind, stethoscope still looped around her neck. She knelt, gently pulled Emily back, and checked Ranger's pulse. Her hand stilled. She looked at Owen, then at Emily. "He's gone." Emily fell forward, face pressed to Ranger's shoulder. She didn't scream. She didn't sob. She just stayed there, silent, unmoving. Rachel wrapped her arms around her. "You're alive. Because of him." Owen didn't speak. He placed a hand on Ranger's head, fingers shaking, then curled into a fist. For the first time in years, he cried. Not like a soldier, but like a father who had just lost the one soul who never stopped protecting his family. Later, when the sun finally pierced the clouds, a stretcher carried Ranger's body back to Bravo 17. They didn't drape him in a flag. They didn't sound a bugle. But everyone on the base stood in silence, and Emily carried his collar in her small hands like a medal made of loyalty. A week had passed since the gunfire in the snow, since Ranger's final act of courage, since Bravo 17 ceased being a military base and became a name on a classified report. The air over Fairbanks felt lighter, as though the land itself was shedding the weight of buried lies. The snow had started to melt, revealing patches of stubborn earth and scattered boot prints, slowly fading beneath the thaw. Inside what remained of the command center, Sergeant Owen Matthews signed the last official document of his career. His posture was still military straight, but his eyes, those had changed. They softened when they looked at Emily and when they lingered on Noah, now sleeping peacefully in the crook of Rachel's arm nearby. Rachel Green was dressed in civilian clothes for the first time since anyone on base had seen her. Jeans, a worn green sweater, and a scarf knit so tightly it looked handmade. She was moving to Anchorage in the morning to take up a position at a small pediatric clinic that catered to displaced children and war orphans. "I think I've had enough of chain of command," she had said, and no one had disagreed. Ben Taylor stood near the exit, already halfway packed to transfer to Joint Base Lewis McChord. A commendation for cybersecurity bravery had landed on his file. His normally disheveled hair had been tamed for the occasion, and he looked both proud and out of place, like someone who didn't quite believe they'd made it to the other side. "Still keeping that laptop encrypted," he joked to Owen as they exchanged a final handshake. The real ceremony, though, happened in the rear courtyard, a quiet gathering under the skeletal branches of leafless trees. A single stone had been planted, gray and unpolished, with a brass plaque that read, "Ranger, Guardian, Brother, Final Watch." No fanfare, no bugle, just silence and breath. Emily stood beside Owen, her gloved hand clutching a folded drawing to her chest. When everyone had stepped back, she knelt and placed it beside the stone. In crayon, it showed a cozy log cabin under a big pine. On the porch, a girl, a baby, a man in a military cap, and a German shepherd at the steps, standing tall. No words. Rachel knelt beside her and wrapped an arm around the child. "He didn't leave you," she whispered. "He just ran ahead." Emily didn't speak, but she nodded. Weeks passed. Spring came late to Alaska, but inside a quiet home just outside Juneau, warmth returned quicker than anyone expected. The house was small but filled with light. Wooden floors creaked pleasantly underfoot, and the smell of black coffee and baby lotion filled the air most mornings. Owen, now officially retired, spent his days gardening or helping Emily with her reading. At night, he'd carry Noah, who was growing stronger every day, through the hallway, humming lullabies half remembered from years ago. On the living room wall, above the mantel, hung two framed items. One, a simple photo of Ranger sitting alert in the snow, eyes sharp, ears high. The other, a medal with no name attached, just the Army's crest and a blank bar. Owen had refused the official inscription. He said it didn't need one. Emily's drawing sat nearby, in a frame Rachel had gifted before she left. Sometimes the house fell quiet, too quiet, and in those moments, Owen would find Emily in the corner of the yard, staring at the sky. Once, he asked what she was thinking. "He was always looking forward," she said, "even when we were scared." Owen placed a hand on her shoulder, "And now we keep going. For him." In Washington, the case files made their way up the chain. Mason had cracked after 3 days of interrogation. His voice had trembled, not when asked about money or power, but when shown the footage of Ranger taking the bullet. "I thought it would be easy," he'd muttered. "I didn't think anyone would die." His trial was scheduled for the fall. His fate was sealed the moment the satellite data hit the federal servers. But back in Alaska, none of that mattered. Not to Owen. Not to Emily. Not to Noah, who was learning to smile now, who laughed when Emily tickled his feet and gurgled at the sound of the wind. And in that house, one story had ended, and another had begun. Sometimes, the smallest hands carry the greatest burdens, and the bravest hearts wear fur. Ranger didn't speak, but he listened. He didn't pray, but he protected. And when it mattered most, he gave everything so that 2 children could live to see another sunrise. Maybe it wasn't luck. Maybe it wasn't coincidence. Maybe it was a miracle. In the quiet between the snowflakes, perhaps God sent a shepherd, not with a staff, but with paws and a bark strong enough to shake fear itself. And through his sacrifice, a broken soldier became a father, and 2 orphans found a home. Let this story be a reminder. No act of love is ever wasted, and no life lived with courage is ever truly gone. Miracles may not always come with thunder and light. They might come with a bark in the night and a soldier who chooses to listen. If you believe in second chances, if you believe that God sometimes sends angels in fur and uniform, share this story. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and if your heart was moved, write Amen below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove hope is real and miracles still walk among us. May God bless you wherever you are.